It's time to replace that burned out resistor down in there. And I am fixing to take these diagonal cutters. And I'm going to go in there for the kill. Now that's the resistor right there. The bad resistor. That's got to be cut here. And it's got to be cut on the other end. So when I'm done, I'm going to have 2 stubs left over. Now this is, of course, if everything goes as planned. I'll have a stub here from one end of that resistor and a stub from here. This is a 1K resistor. Are we ready? I'm going to let you watch me do it. Here we go. We're going to get up close there. It's cut. Alright, I done did it now. It's too late. I have committed myself. So now what we're going to do is pull that off to the side and try to wiggle the other lead up. It's a little bit tight in there, and just kind of get that lead up where I can maybe get in there with my cutters. It's kind of hard. Ooh, it just popped right off. Look at there. She just broke right off. Well, we don't need that piece anyway. And we're going to kind of reposition this thing a little bit to where I can get to it. Boy, she's just crumbling away. All right. One-handed. Even one-handed we can do this. This stuff is so easy. God, come on, guys. Anybody can do this. Get the old cutters down in there, and there it is. It's nipped off. Where's the other piece? Down here somewhere. There she be. There we go. It is now cut off. And I have the 2 stubs sticking up. Now I need to prepare this resistor to go over those 2 stubs. But the first thing we're going to do is take a brush and a little bit of alcohol. We're going to get up in there and clean those studs. We want to clean them all up. Then I'll take the needle nose and pull them out just a little bit, reposition them to where they're easier after I prepare this resistor. It'll be easier to slip on, because what I'm going to do this replacement resistor is I'm going to use this little old 1/32 inch jeweler's screwdriver. And I'm going to coil the wire. Each lead is going to be coiled around that screwdriver blade. And then we'll be ready to position it up in there and get it ready for soldering. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I have cleaned these stubs off real good with alcohol. And then I took my needle nose and reached in there and grabbed each stub and kind of pulled it toward me a little bit to where I could get to it a little better. But you got to be careful now pulling those stubs, because you don't want to break anything in the process. And once I got them bent toward me a little bit, I realized that one of them was just a tad too long. So I went ahead and nipped it off right there. I don't know if you guys are seeing that very well. This camera is so bad about close-ups. Anyway, I went ahead and nipped it down. All you need is about 1/4 of an inch of a stub on each side, okay? You have to leave enough room in the center between the stubs for your new resistor to fit in. Then I took the replacement resistor and I laid it next to the 1/32 inch screwdriver shaft and began coiling it around. Here I've only coiled it one time. I'll go ahead and finish it and show you what it looks like. Normally I coil the entire length of lead, but here we're going to be really cramped for space. So I figure 3 turns around the screwdriver shaft is about all I'm going to need, and then I'll cut off the remaining. Like so. Okay. Now we've got 3 turns around the screwdriver shaft. Alright, the other end is now coiled, and like I said before, if all goes as planned, I should be able to slip one of those coiled ends over the stub on the bottom, and one of the coiled ends, the opposite end, over the stub on the top. Now I may have to reposition the wires a little bit, or those coiled leads, and to get them to where they fit real good. You don't want to force anything. You want them to just slip right over there. The coils will hold them in place, will hold the resistor in place until I can get it soldered. So let me see what I can do. I mean, like I said, I may have to bend it just slightly this way, slightly that way, until I get it to fit nicely on the bottom stub and on the top stub. Now I have, in the past, cut the leads too short, cut the coils off too short, and wound up ruining a resistor. and have to use another resistor and do it all over again. Well, you know, if that happens, so what? Well, there we go. It took a little manipulating, you know, pushing up on one coil and pushing down on the other and repositioning and everything. You know, it's one of those patient deals. Patience. And I finally have the coil slipped over the top and one slipped over the bottom. And it's holding itself in there. It doesn't get any better than that. Let me see if I can zoom in here. I doubt it. Maybe we can see better this way. I don't know. Anyway, what I'm going to do now is go ahead and put the old soldering iron to it. None of the leads are touching anything else. Fantastic. It's called the coil method of component replacement. I use it all the time. And the reason I do that is so I don't have to unsolder and mess around with wafer switch connections. You start overheating them, sticking your soldering iron down in there, you've got all kinds of problems that are going to be associated. Tube socket in particular. A lot of people try to unsolder the wires from the tube sockets and everything, and they wind up messing up the tube socket pins. It's just not worth it, guys. Use the coil method of repair, cut your stubs, solder it in place. You know, it takes a little bit of practice, but once you get it down pat, piece of cake. Remember, it's a 1/32 inch jeweler's screwdriver that I use for most of the leads. Now, not all leads. Some leads are a little bit fatter, so you'll need a complete jeweler's screwdriver kit. And use the one, coil the wire around the shaft of the screwdriver. That'll do the job for you. Let's go ahead and heat up the soldering iron and see if we can't solder that in place. Because as soon as we got done there, we've got a couple more that need to be replaced here. These are 100K. You know, as I said, this is a restoration. Now's the time to get in there and make your changes. Don't wait until you solder everything up. Put it back in the chassis, solder everything up, and then find out later you got to unsolder everything and go back in there again. Do it now. Now's the time to do it. Take your time. There is no rush to any of this. This is fun stuff. Well, there it is, all soldered in, solid as a rock. I'm going to go ahead and clean my solder joint with alcohol and a brush. Always be careful though. Remember, if you work around something like this, you work around anything that has wafer switch, there's going to be little brass contacts in there and you don't want to mess those up, so be very delicate with your cleaning. But I still encourage you to try to clean them once they're soldered. Well, that's it. All we're going to do now is repeat that process for this resistor, and I've got this one I think is good. I think that resistor is good. I'll probably leave that, but these other two I'm not sure about. There's two other 33 K ohm resistors in here. There's one down here and one over here. Depending on the readings I get there, I'll have to turn the band switch in order to get my readings. I think right now the way the thing is positioned is I'm reading through these coils, and I don't want to do that. I don't get the right reading. Here's a situation you might run into. I can go ahead and cut this resistor off and this resistor off, leaving two stubs, and I can cut the end of this one, leaving a stub. But right here, it's right up close and wrapped around a small tab on the metal bracket, the copper bracket. So what do you do there? Well, it's no problem. You just go ahead and unsolder it, heat it up, unsolder it, and don't worry about a stub. You go ahead and make your stub on the opposite end, solder in your, make one coil and solder it in here, then take the other end, just sort of wrap it around. But when you try to do it, you have to be very careful, because in a case like this, there is an adjustable screw right here that cannot be, you can't let the resistor you change it with block that screw on that capacitor. I don't know if you can make out that screw down there. So that's why it's clear of that screw. It has to be moved down this way. But when I get done, there won't be any stub, there won't be any coil on this end. It'll just be wrapped around, soldered in place. The coil will be on the stub on the other end. For those of you who have never seen one of these before, I'll go over it one more time. Some of you may have never seen my videos. Every so often I tell folks about it. I have seen videos where a person has used one of these and people have written in and said, what is that blue thing? It's a solder extractor. It's nothing more than a plunger inside an aluminum barrel with a thumb mechanism to engage the plunger. It goes down, and when you hit this black button, it releases. So what we do is we heat up the solder joint right there with the soldering iron with one hand, and with the other, once the solder gets all kind of fluid, all kind of melty and everything, then we stick it up there and hit the old button. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 times to do it, to get it off. And that makes it easier to unwind your leads. One more thing and then I'll get off this soldering deal. You know, keep your tip of your iron clean. Always keep the tip of your iron clean. I use a rag, that white rag there, to wipe the tip clean. And then, you know, I'm about to melt this blob of solder so I can take my solder extractor and suck it off of there. But if I just take the dry tip and lay it there, it takes a long time to get it to melt. But I'm going to get a little help, and this is the way you can do it. You go down to your roll of solder and you melt a little bit of solder off the roll onto the tip, and then you apply it to the blob of solder and it'll melt much faster. That's your tip of the day. Since the lighting was so dull when I was so low when I was trying to show you the resistors being replaced, I decided to wait until the next day, which is today, and bring it out in the sunlight so you can have a little better look. Here's the resistor I replaced, the 1K right here, and there's the bottom coil soldered to the tab on the wafer switch, and here's the top coil soldered in place to the terminal. And then over here are 2 100K resistors. One of them has a coil soldered there, and another one down here to a tab on the wafer switch, and also with this second one. And here it's just wrapped around this this metal bracket as a ground. Just wrapped around once. I took away all that blob of solder that was there previously. It does not take a whole lot of solder to do these solder joints. You know, blobbing and blobbing does not give you a better contact. Use only the amount of solder you need. It takes practice. Sometimes it takes years of practice.